The hum of the centrifuge was the only sound in the small laboratory, steady and familiar, like the heartbeat of a life Isa had built carefully out of silence. She moved with calm precision, measuring samples, recording results, keeping her world small and controlled. To her colleagues, she was Dr. Isabel Vega, quiet, competent and unremarkably brilliant. No one questioned why she never talked about family or why she drove an old car when her credentials could have opened doors to any prestigious research center in the world. Invisibility was her greatest invention. On her desk, hidden beneath a pile of lab reports, lay a small velvet pouch. Inside was a ring, platinum, engraved with the crest of the Moreno family empire. Her father's legacy, her inheritance, her burden. She never wore it, never spoke of it, never allowed herself to remember the mansion in Madrid or the boardrooms where her signature could shift markets. Isa had walked away from all of it after his death. Money built by deceit and manipulation had no place in the world she wanted to create. She preferred the sterile honesty of science, the quiet truth of data over the noise of power. That morning, her supervisor reminded her of the upcoming international conference, a week-long gathering of medical innovators, investors, and scientists. Isa almost declined. She hated the attention, the empty praise, but her research on genetic repair algorithms had reached a stage that could change clinical medicine, and hiding forever wasn't an option. The hotel ballroom buzzed with voices, name tags, and forced laughter when she arrived. Isa felt out of place among the tailored suits and polished egos. Her dark curls were tied back in a low bun, her grey dress simple and neat. While others spoke loudly about patents and funding, she carried only a notebook filled with formulas and hope. She had just finished presenting her paper when she noticed him. Nathan Cross. His reputation preceded him, a self-made millionaire who rescued dying companies and turned them into miracles, handsome in a way that drew eyes and made people listen. His voice carried authority, not arrogance, and when he asked a question from the audience, it was sharp, insightful, and slightly challenging. "Dr. Vega," he said after her presentation, offering his hand with a polite smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Impressive work, but your model assumes a level of funding most labs can't sustain. Are you sure it's realistic?" Isa met his gaze evenly. "If I built only what was realistic, we'd still be treating pain with leeches." He laughed, surprised by her wit. "So you prefer impossible goals?" "No," she said, taking her notes. "I prefer necessary ones." For a moment the crowd faded, and it was just the two of them, a man who had built an empire from ambition, and a woman who had buried hers to start anew. There was respect in his eyes now, curiosity too. He followed her out into the lobby afterward, coffee cups in hand, continuing their debate. They argued about ethics, funding, and the role of profit in innovation. Every time he smiled, something inside her trembled, a long-forgotten spark flickering back to life. As the conference went on, their encounters became frequent, accidental at first, then deliberate. Isa found herself waiting for his questions, his teasing remarks, the way his eyes softened when she spoke passionately about saving lives rather than making millions. He was everything she should have avoided, confident, powerful, and dangerously persuasive. Yet he treated her not as a woman to impress, but as a mind worth listening to. One evening, after a long panel, they walked along the quiet river near the hotel. City lights shimmered on the water, and the air carried the scent of rain. "You're not like the others," he said softly. "You don't chase money or recognition. Why are you really doing this?" She looked at the dark water, her reflection rippling beside his. "Because somewhere out there is a little girl who won't have to die if I finish this research. That's all that matters." Nathan studied her face, a quiet admiration in his expression. "You know," he said, "most people talk about changing the world because they want to be remembered. You talk like someone who already has everything but doesn't want it. The words hit too close. Isa forced a small smile, deflecting. Or maybe I'm just bad at pretending. When she returned to her room that night, she placed the Moreno family ring on the desk and stared at it under the lamplight. The silver gleam felt heavy, accusing. She whispered to herself, "Not yet. Not him. Not this time." Then she closed the velvet pouch and locked it away again. But even as she turned off the light, her heart betrayed her, racing faster than logic could quiet it. Somewhere between the sterile walls of her lab and the warmth of his eyes, something dangerous had begun. A connection built not on lies, but on everything she was too afraid to tell him. The night wind carried the smell of wet concrete and city rain. When Nathan knocked on Isa's door, he had promised her coffee after the conference, but when she opened it and saw him standing there, drenched and smiling, she forgot to breathe. He held 2 cups in his hands, both dripping with rainwater. "One hot and one cold. I didn't know how you take it," he said. "I guess I wanted to be right about something tonight." She hesitated before letting him in. Her apartment was small, filled with books and research papers and a half-finished experiment. Glowing softly on her desk, he looked around, fascinated. There was no sign of luxury, no sign of the kind of life people with her education usually lived. It was just her honest quiet, simple. He looked at her then at the tiny lab setup in her living room and asked, "Why do I feel like this is where real discoveries happen?" Isa smiled faintly because here no one steals them, she replied. He didn't understand, but he wanted to. He watched her push her hair behind her ear, her eyes deep and tired. "And brilliant, you work like someone running from something," he said softly. "Maybe I am," she answered before she could stop herself. He moved closer, their voices lowering into the kind of silence that felt like a secret. His presence filled the room, heavy and magnetic. She tried to focus on the hum of the machine, the steady rhythm of safety, but his nearness broke through it. "What are you so afraid of, Isa?" he asked gently. She met his gaze for too long, then looked away. "I'm afraid of being seen." Moment passed, but left its shadow behind in the weeks that followed. Their connection grew in quiet corners and late-night calls. They argued about science and laughed about nothing. They shared dinners and inside jokes. She began to trust him more than she should. One evening he confessed something that made her pulse skip. "When I was 14, I sold my father's watch to buy my mother medicine." He said, "We were broke, and she was dying. I promised myself I'd never be powerless again. I swore I'd make enough money that no one I love would ever suffer like that again." She felt his pain like her own, because she too had built a life from ashes. Only her ashes were made of gold. She didn't tell him that her family's name could have paid for every lab in the city. She didn't tell him that the Moreno fortune he envied was hers to command. Instead, she stayed quiet and said, "I understand." One night after a long research presentation, he took her hand as they walked down the empty corridor. He said, "You make me believe that people like us can change the world." And before she could stop him, he kissed her. It was soft, hesitant, filled with the weight of everything unsaid. When she returned home, she opened her drawer. The ring glinted faintly beneath the papers. She took it out just once to feel the cool metal against her palm. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Money is power, and power is survival." She closed her fist tight against the thought and whispered, "Not anymore, but fate has its own timing." The next morning, she found an email invitation from a private investor offering a full funding partnership. It was from Cross Ventures, Nathan's company. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. Every part of her life was about to collide: her hidden fortune, his ambition, their fragile love, and a truth that could destroy them both. As she sat there frozen in the pale morning light, she didn't see Nathan standing outside her building, watching her window with a look that was not just love, but something darker, curiosity mixed with doubt. He didn't know her secret yet, but the first crack of suspicion had already begun to open, and nothing would ever be simple again. The night before their engagement party, Isa could not sleep. Thunder rolled across the sky like a warning. Her heart kept repeating one question: how long can a lie survive in love? She stared at the velvet ring box on the table next to the hidden drawer where another ring slept, the Moreno crest flashing whenever lightning struck. She whispered to herself, "Not yet, not now. If he loves me, he will love me without it." Nathan had spent the whole day planning the perfect proposal he wanted to show her she was his equal. He wanted to silence the board members who whispered that he was too proud to settle down for once. He wanted something real. He had even invited his mother, despite knowing her sharp tongue would make Isa uncomfortable. When the evening came, the city lights shimmered through glass walls as guests filled the penthouse. Nathan took her hand in front of everyone and said, "She saved me from myself, and I want to spend my life proving I deserve her." Isa smiled, but inside she trembled. She felt eyes on her like blades, especially the cold, calculating gaze of Elena Cross after the toast. Elena stepped forward with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "My dear," she said, "may I speak to you alone?" Isa nodded politely, unaware that the moment would destroy everything. In the quiet of the dressing room, Elena laid down a folder on the table. Inside were documents, photographs, records of a woman named Isabella Moreno, the missing heiress of the Moreno fortune, the empire her father built before his mysterious death. Isa froze, unable to move or speak. Elena's voice was smooth as poison. "You think I wouldn't find out? You think you can hide behind a false name? Marry my son and make a fool of me? You are a liar pretending to be poor when you were born rich. You tricked him into loving you." Isa's eyes filled with tears. "It's not like that. I didn't want him to love my money. I wanted him to love me." Elena leaned closer. "Then why hide it?" "Because," she whispered, "I was ashamed of what my family did, because money ruined everything. It ruined people like you." Outside, Nathan waited unaware until his mother returned, her expression calm but triumphant. She leaned close to him and whispered, "Do you know who your perfect woman really is? She is a Moreno, the same family that destroyed your first company, the same people who stole your father's patent when you were a boy." Nathan's face went pale. He remembered the nights his mother cried, the years they lived in. Hunger, the humiliation of watching others rise on his father's invention. His voice shook when he said, "That's not true." But doubt had already found its way in. When Isa returned, her hands trembled. She saw the distance in his eyes, and something inside her broke. Nathan asked her quietly, "Is it true, tell me who you really are?" She tried to speak, but he stepped back as if her truth was a weapon. "You lied to me," he said. "I gave you everything and you gave me lies." She reached for him. "Please." "Nathan, I did it to protect us, not to deceive you," but his pride was louder than her tears. He turned away and said, "I don't want to marry a ghost. I want someone real." She stood frozen as he walked out into the storm, her chest heavy with pain that felt like death. She whispered into the empty room, "I loved you more than my name, but love was never enough." When the thunder faded, she packed her bag, leaving behind her white dress and the ring he gave her in its place. She left the Moreno ring on the table, a confession and a farewell. The next morning, the tabloids would speak of scandal and betrayal, but by then, Isa would already be gone, and the secret she carried inside her would begin to grow, the secret that would one day bring him to his knees. The sound of the rain hitting the airplane window was the only thing that kept Isa from crying out loud. She had no luggage except a small bag with her passport, her research notes, and the ultrasound photo she hadn't meant to bring but couldn't throw away. The tiny heartbeat printed on it was proof that something good had survived the wreckage of her love. The doctor had said there might be two heartbeats, she wasn't sure yet, but Isa didn't need confirmation. She already felt them, two small souls growing inside her, carrying pieces of both her and the man who had shattered her. She landed in Madrid before dawn. The city was asleep, wrapped in fog. The estate her father had left stood at the edge of the hills, silent. For years since his death, the gates opened for her as if they had been waiting. She stepped inside her old home and whispered, "I'm back, Father, but not for your fortune this time. I came to build something clean, something that will never break." Because of greed, weeks turned into months. Her belly grew. With her hidden children, she turned the old Moreno laboratories into a private clinic devoted to genetic therapy. She worked endlessly day and night, hiding behind her new name, Dr. Isabel Vega. Her voice calm, her heart iron. The staff respected her, but no one knew who she truly was. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see the same woman who once cried over Nathan. She saw someone forged in fire in New York. Nathan tried to bury himself in work, but nothing worked. His company Cross Ventures had lost several investors after the scandal. His pride refused to admit it, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face in the storm, whispering, "Did it to protect us." His mother kept saying, "You were lucky to escape her." But deep down, he didn't believe Isa was a liar. He believed he had been a coward one. Afternoon, a courier arrived at Isa's estate with papers. The return address said Cross Ventures. She opened the envelope slowly. Her hands trembling inside were official divorce documents already signed by Nathan. The words, "final dissolution of marriage," felt like a blade cutting through the last piece of hope she still carried. But what broke her wasn't his signature, it was the note written at the bottom. "You deceived me. I hope your money keeps you warm." She sat there for hours, staring at the letter, until tears fell silently onto the paper. She whispered to her unborn children, "You will never know this pain. You will grow in light, not pride, not revenge." The next morning she signed the documents without hesitation, her name flowing like ice across the page. Isabel Vega, not Isabella Moreno, not the woman he once loved, but the woman who no longer needed him. She sealed the envelope and sent it back, then went to the lab and continued her work, as if nothing had happened. Months later, under the soft light of dawn, her cries filled the private clinic as two premature babies entered the world. A boy and a girl, small, fragile but alive. She held them close, whispering, "Liam and Leela, my reason, my redemption." Outside, thunder rolled again, but this time she didn't flinch. The storm no longer frightened her. She had survived. It already far away in New York. Nathan woke from a dream where two children called his name, and a woman he couldn't forget turned away without looking back. He sat up in bed, breathless, the city lights reflecting in his tired eyes, and whispered, "Into the dark is a." Neither of them knew it yet, but destiny had already begun to weave them back together. Their love was not dead. It was waiting, buried under pride and distance, waiting for the day he would kneel before the woman who once hid her. Fortune and his twins. 5 years later, the morning sun touched the towers of Madrid, painting them gold. Isa stood before the mirror, fastening a silver pendant around her neck. The twins were running through the hallway, their laughter echoing like music. Liam was bold, curious, already obsessed with circuits and puzzles. Lila softer, observant, watching her mother with quiet eyes that seemed to know too much. Isa had built a new world for them, a world free of betrayal and greed. But sometimes, when the house fell silent, she could still feel Nathan's shadow moving through her thoughts. She had become the youngest CEO in Europe to lead a biotech empire. Her company, Moreno Global, had risen from the ashes and now funded hospitals' research centers and orphan programs. She was known in the industry as Dr. Isabel Vega, the ghost heiress. No one could trace. Reporters tried to uncover her origins, but every trail ended in silence. She had erased every link to her old life because love had once been her greatest weakness, and she had promised herself it would never be. Again, that morning, her assistant rushed in with an envelope, his voice shaking a message from New York. "They want to negotiate a merger with us. The company is Cross Ventures." Isa froze. The name hit her like lightning. She took the letter slowly, her heart pounding as she read the proposal. Nathan Cross, CEO of Cross Ventures, requesting a meeting with Dr. Vega to discuss global partnership. Her hand trembled. She placed the letter on her desk, trying to breathe. It couldn't be him after all these years. Why now she had worked so hard to stay invisible, her secret life, her children, her empire, everything depended on remaining unseen. But curiosity crept through the walls. She whispered to herself, "I will face him not as the woman he left, but as the woman he lost." The meeting was scheduled in Geneva. 3 weeks later, Isa arrived in a dark, tailored suit, her hair pinned back, her expression calm. She entered the glass conference room to find him standing by the window, older, harder, his charm now carved with regret. Their eyes met, and time folded in on itself. For a heartbeat, there was no empire between them, only the ghosts of a love once too alive to do anything. Spoke first, his voice quieter than she remembered. "Dr. Vega, thank you for coming," she replied. "Mr. Cross, please proceed." He blinked at her voice, something in it tugging at his memory. He began explaining his company's struggles, his words polished, but his hands restless. His empire was crumbling, investors leaving faster than he could rebuild. His mother's debts had poisoned everything. She watched him carefully, her mind cold, her heart not so much. When the meeting ended, he said softly, "Have we met before you seem familiar?" She gathered her papers. "I don't believe so, Mr. Cross," and turned to leave, but he reached out just enough to stop her, his fingers brushing hers. The same electricity she thought she had buried shot through her. She pulled away quickly and walked out of the room, her breath shallow, her eyes stinging. That night in her hotel, she sat by the window staring at the city lights, her children sleeping in the next room. She whispered, "I shouldn't have come back," but the truth was already awake inside her somewhere. Nathan had felt it too. The unspoken recognition, the way his heart had stumbled when he looked at her. And deep down, he knew that behind the name, Vega behind, the calm face was the only woman he had ever loved, the one he had driven away and far across the city. Nathan stood alone on his balcony, holding the signed merger proposal, wondering why the woman from Madrid felt like a memory he had been dreaming of for years. He whispered into the cold air. Isa and the night carried her name back to her. The next morning, Nathan sat in his office staring at the document signed by Dr. Vega. Something inside him refused to rest. Her eyes, her voice, the way she moved, it all felt like a story he had lived before. He couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't a stranger. He called his assistant and said, "Find everything you can about her background, but quietly, I don't want her to know." Days later, a folder arrived on his desk. The report was brief, almost too clean. Dr. Isabel Vega, born in Spain, founder of Moreno Global Biotech, private life, unknown, no family history, no records before 5 years ago. It was as if she had appeared out of thin air. Nathan. A frown, the name. Moreno echoed somewhere deep in his memory, but he couldn't place it until he reached the last page, a financial chart listing Moreno Global's silent investors. One name stopped his breath. Isabella Moreno. Foundation. The world tilted around him as her name struck him like lightning. The woman he had destroyed, the woman he couldn't forget. He whispered into the empty room, "It's her! She's alive!" He left the office without telling anyone, boarded the first flight to Madrid and drove straight to the address listed for Moreno Global's headquarters. When he entered the lobby, every guard and employee turned to look, but no one dared to stop him. He found her in the top-floor conference room, standing before a wall of glass overlooking the city. The afternoon light wrapped around her like gold. She didn't turn when she heard the door close behind her. She only said, "You found me." He stepped closer, unable to speak. "Isa," he whispered. Her shoulders stiffened. She faced him, her eyes calm, unreadable, no anger, no tears, only distance. "Hello, Nathan," she said softly, as if greeting an old colleague. "Not a lost love. Why didn't you tell me you were alive?" he asked, his voice breaking. She looked at him quietly. "I wasn't dead. You just stopped looking." He tried to explain himself, but the words tangled. "I was wrong. I was foolish. My mother, she told me things I shouldn't have believed. I thought you were hiding something from me." She smiled sadly. "I was hiding something from you, but not the thing you think. I hid who I was, because I wanted to be loved, not bought." He took a step forward, but she moved back. "Nathan, you should go. We have a professional agreement, nothing more." He shook his head. "I can't. Pretend you're just a partner." Not after everything. She looked down, then whispered, "Neither can I, but pretending is what we must do." For the next few weeks, they worked side by side, negotiating terms, signing contracts. Their meetings were filled with unspoken memories. Every touch, accidental, every glance, heavy. One night after a late meeting, he walked her to her car. Rain falling softly on the street. He said, "Do you ever think about us?" She paused, the rain running down her face like tears. "There is no us. There is only what you destroyed and what I built after." He wanted to tell her about the nights he dreamed of her, about the years he spent searching her face in strangers, but her car door shut before he could speak. He stood there, in the rain, watching her drive away. That same night back at her villa, Isa stood by the window, watching the twins asleep, their faces peaceful. She whispered to the darkness, "He knows," and in her heart a fear she had buried for years began to rise. Because the man who once broke her heart had finally found her. And he didn't know that the two children sleeping upstairs were his. The gala in Paris was the kind of event Isa once promised herself she would never attend. Chandeliers glittered. Above men in tuxedos and women in diamonds, cameras flashed as the world's richest and most powerful gathered to celebrate innovation. But tonight she was not Isabella Moreno, the woman who once ran from wealth. She was Dr. Isabel Vega, the woman who had rebuilt it. And this time she walked through that ballroom as if she owned every wall. She had come to announce a new medical breakthrough, a treatment that could save thousands of children from rare blood disorders. Her voice was calm as she stepped onto the stage, her silver gown catching the light. She began her speech about ethics and humanity in science, but halfway through she saw him. Nathan standing near the back of the room, his eyes fixed on her like he was seeing a ghost. The world seemed to fade, her heart stumbled, but she kept speaking, every word clear, steady, powerful. When she finished, the crowd rose in applause, yet she could barely hear it. Nathan was already walking toward her, his expression unreadable. She felt her pulse quicken. He stopped only a few feet away, his voice low enough for her alone. "I knew it was you." Isa, for a moment, neither moved. The noise of the gala swirled around them like a dream. Then she smiled, a polite, distant smile, and turned away. Security surrounded her as photographers shouted questions, but behind her she could feel his presence like a shadow that refused to fade. Later that night, as guests gathered for the dinner gala, Nathan slipped past the guards into the private corridor. Leading to her suite, he found her standing near the balcony overlooking the river, the city lights reflected in her eyes. She didn't turn when she said, "I told you we had nothing left to say." He replied, "Then why do you still sound like you're waiting for me?" Her hands tightened on the railing. "Don't do this, Nathan. You have no right to come back into my life." He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "I have every right. I need to know the truth. You built an empire on the ashes of what we had, and I need to understand." How she turned to face him, her eyes bright with fury. "You don't deserve to understand. You threw me away like I was nothing." He reached for her hand, but she pulled back. His touch brushed her bracelet, and for a fleeting moment He saw something that made him freeze, a tiny engraved plate. 2 names, Liam and Lila. His voice caught in his throat. "Those names, where did you—" She backed away, her face pale. "That's none of your business." "Nathan." His eyes widened. "They're mine, aren't they?" The words fell heavy between them. The silence that followed was colder than the night outside. She tried to walk past him, but he blocked the door, his voice breaking. "How could you hide them from me, Isa? They're my children, her." Eyes filled with tears. "You lost that right when you walked away. I hid them from your pride, from your cruelty, from the man who made me sign those papers." He sank to his knees, his voice raw. "Isa, please. I was blind. I didn't know I can fix this. I can be there for them. For you." She shook her head. "No, you can't fix what you destroyed." She stepped past him, leaving him on the floor, the door closing softly behind her. Outside, the rain had begun to fall, and in the grand ballroom below, the music played on no one. Noticed the man who had once owned everything kneeling on marble floors, whispering the names of the children he had never met, while the woman who once loved him wiped her tears and promised herself that this time she would never break again. The news spread through the business world like wildfire. Nathan Cross had been seen leaving the Paris Gala in the middle of the night, pale, trembling, broken. His investors panicked, rumors filled the headlines. Some said he had begged the mysterious Dr. Vega for forgiveness. Others claimed he was ruined by her company's growing dominance, but none of them knew the truth. Only Isa knew what had really happened in that hallway, and the look on his face when he realized the twins were his back. In Madrid, Isa tried to continue her routine, but everything inside her felt shaken. Her children were her world. She had built their lives on safety, on distance from the man who once destroyed her. She told herself the truth didn't matter. He would soon disappear from her life again, just as he had years ago. But she was wrong. Nathan had always been relentless in pursuit of what he lost. A week later, he arrived uninvited at her headquarters. This time, there were no security barriers strong enough to stop him. He stormed through the lobby, demanding to see her, his voice echoing through the marble halls. When Isa finally walked into the room, the air thickened. Everyone else silently left. Closing the doors behind them, he looked at her. Like a man haunted by ghosts, she stood calm and collected, but her pulse raced. She said, "You shouldn't be here, Nathan," he replied. "You kept my children from me. You think I can just walk away?" She met his eyes with quiet defiance. "You walked away. The first time, remember." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I made a mistake, but I won't lose them too. I've filed for paternal rights." Isa froze. "You wouldn't." He nodded. "I already did. I have the DNA tests. They're mine." She felt her knees weaken. How he smiled sadly. "Your daughter's hospital file when she was sick last winter. I had someone run a sample. I didn't want to believe it until I saw it." Her fury rose like fire. "How dare you invade our lives again?" she whispered. He said, "Because I still love you. And because I will not let my pride steal what's left of us." The days that followed turned into a storm of legal papers and headlines. Journalists dug into her private life. Her company shares trembled. The court battle began cold and merciless. Nathan demanded visitation rights, while Isa's lawyers fought to protect the twins from exposure. But when the court ordered mediation between them, everything changed. In a small private room, they sat across from each other, silence heavier than words. The mediator asked them to talk directly. Nathan's voice cracked. "I don't want their inheritance. I don't want your money. I just want to be their father." Isa stared at him, tears glistening. "I don't trust you. You'll destroy them the way you destroyed me." He leaned forward. "Desperate, Isa, please give me one chance." She stood and said, "You'll never understand what it means to protect something that came from pain. You were born chasing success. I was reborn." And carrying it as she walked away, he whispered, "Then teach me how." And for the first time, she stopped, her heart beating fast. She didn't answer, but her eyes softened just slightly. It was the first time in years she saw not arrogance in him but regret. That night, she sat beside her sleeping children and whispered, "Maybe some wounds aren't meant to heal. Maybe they're meant to remind us how strong we've become outside." The rain fell over Madrid again and far away. Nathan sat alone in his hotel, staring at a photo of the twins on his phone, his fingers tracing their faces as he whispered, "I'll earn them even if I lose everything else." The court hearings dragged on for weeks, turning Isa's quiet world into chaos. Every morning, cameras waited. Outside her company gates, reporters shouting questions about hidden heirs and secret fathers. She kept her head high, her voice steady, her heart locked away. She would not let the world see her break. But at night, when the lights dimmed and her children slept, she sat alone, staring at their photographs, praying the storm would pass. Nathan, meanwhile, had stopped fighting her in the press. His lawyers advised him to attack, but he refused. Instead, he began showing up quietly at the hospital charity wing. She funded volunteering during children's treatment hours. The nurses whispered about it. The man who once built his empire on pride now spent hours helping sick kids paint pictures and read stories. He was rebuilding himself not with money, but with kindness. One afternoon, Isa arrived at the clinic for an inspection and saw him through the glass wall. Liam was sitting on his lap, laughing, while Lila painted his hand with bright red hearts. Isa froze, her throat tightening. The twins had never looked so happy. Nathan didn't see her at first when he did. His smile faltered, his voice soft, as he said, "They're beautiful." Isa whispered, "I know." He stood and said, "I didn't come to win a case, I came to be their father." She wanted to believe him, but her fear still screamed louder. "You can't just walk back into their lives," she said. "You can't erase the pain you caused." He looked at her with quiet sorrow. "Maybe not, but I can make sure it ends with me, not them." That night a storm rolled, in thick and violent lightning tearing across the sky. Isa was driving home with the twins when she noticed the flashing lights of an ambulance blocking the road. Traffic stopped. Emergency sirens wailed. Her heart began to race when she heard the name of the hospital they were taking. Someone to her phone rang. Her assistant's panicked voice said, "Dr. Vega, there's been an accident. Mr. Cross was hit while leaving the clinic." Isa's world blurred. She turned the car around, speeding through the rain, ignoring the horns and chaos. When she reached the hospital, she ran through the corridors barefoot, soaked her chest, burning. She found him on the stretcher, blood staining his shirt, but his eyes still open, searching for her. He whispered, "Don't cry, Isa, I'm still here." The doctor said he'd lost a lot of blood. They needed an immediate transfusion, but his type was rare. There was only one perfect match. Isa felt her knees give way. She looked toward the children's chart. The same. "Blood type Lila," she whispered. "My daughter has the same blood." The decision tore through her heart, but she didn't hesitate. Within minutes, she signed the consent forms. The little girl's small hand reached for hers. "Mommy, will Daddy be okay?" Isa's tears fell. She kissed her daughter's forehead and said, "He will, because of you." Hours passed before the surgeon came out, exhausted but smiling, both patients stable. Isa broke down in relief when she saw Nathan again. He was pale but alive. She sat beside him, his hand weakly searching for hers. When their fingers touched, he whispered, "You saved me." She shook her head. "No. Nathan, she saved you." The room fell silent except for the steady rhythm of the monitor. Their eyes met, and for the first time in years there was no pride between them, only truth and the fragile heartbeat of forgiveness. Outside, the rain had stopped, the first light of dawn spilling across the horizon, painting the world gold again. But this time it felt different. This time it felt like hope. The morning light crept into the hospital room, soft and golden. Nathan opened his eyes to find Isa asleep beside him, her head resting on her arm. The twins curled up on the couch nearby for a moment. He thought he was dreaming until he felt the weight of her hand in his His chest ached, but not from the injury. It was something deeper, the ache of years wasted, the ache of realizing what truly mattered. Isa stirred and lifted her head, her eyes red from sleepless nights. "You should rest," she whispered. He smiled weakly. "I've rested long enough. I don't want to close my eyes again. I might lose this." She shook her head. "Don't talk like that. You need to heal." He looked at her and said quietly, "I'm not talking about my body. I'm talking about you, us, what we lost." The days that followed were slow and quiet. While he recovered, the twins visited every morning, their laughter filling the sterile halls. Lila brought him drawings of hearts, and Liam asked endless questions about machines, and wires every moment tore at Isa's walls, until she could no longer deny the truth, that somewhere beneath her anger, she still loved the man who now read bedtime stories and apologized without words. One evening, she stepped out onto the hospital balcony, the sunset bleeding into the horizon. Nathan followed her, his steps unsteady, but determined. He stood beside her, watching the light fade. Neither spoke for a long time. Then he said, "I spent years thinking I was building an empire, but the truth is, I was just running from emptiness. I thought power would make me untouchable, but it only made me hollow." She turned to him quietly. "And what makes you full now?" He looked at her. The twins. The quiet peace around them. This you. She wanted to stay angry. She wanted to remind him of the nights she cried, the fear, the humiliation. But his voice broke through all of it. "Isa, I know I can never erase the past, but if you let me, I'll spend the rest of my life being the man I should have been," she whispered. "And if I don't," he smiled, "then I'll still love you, because I finally understand love isn't about getting. It's about giving." A few weeks later, he was discharged. He insisted on walking out on his own. The press waited outside. Flashing cameras, the world curious to see the man and woman who had turned scandal into legend. Isa took the twins' hands as they stepped into the sunlight. Reporters shouted questions, but Nathan simply said no comment and led them through the crowd to a waiting car. Months passed, and the court withdrew his petition. After Isa requested it, she had seen enough to know he no longer needed laws to prove his devotion. He had become part of their lives, quietly, respectfully, never overstepping. She watched him teach Liam how to fix an engine, watched Lila fall asleep on his chest during story time, and one night as she stood at the doorway, she realized the hatred she once carried had finally burned out, leaving only ash and something like peace. On Christmas Eve, they visited the orphan wing her company had built together. The children gathered around the tree, Nathan dressed as Santa. His beard crooked, the twins laughing uncontrollably. Isa watched from the back, smiling when he caught her eye across the room. His grin softened. He walked over, pulled off the fake beard and whispered, "You never told me your greatest secret." She tilted her head. "What secret?" He smiled, "That you were my miracle long before I deserved one." Outside, snow began to fall, the city glowing with light. The twins ran into the courtyard chasing snowflakes, their laughter echoing through the air. Isa turned to Nathan and said quietly, "Maybe some things are worth forgiving. Maybe some people are worth a second chance." He stepped closer, his breath warm against the cold, and asked, "Is that what this is?" She smiled. "Maybe it's the beginning of forever." He took her hand, and for the first time, there were no lies, no pride, no distance, only truth, love, and the small family they had built from the ruins of their past. The millionaire who once knelt in guilt now stood beside the woman who had taught him what it meant to be human. And as snow blanketed the city below, she whispered softly, "Welcome home, Nathan." The story ended. Not with riches, but with redemption. Not with grand promises, but with quiet truth. Two hearts once broken, now beating in rhythm again. Proof that even after betrayal, even after years of silence, love could still return stronger than before. Forever rewritten by forgiveness.